Hello and welcome everyone to the over-the-counter masterclass drop-in session. We'll be making a start in a few seconds whilst we let people in. Just so you are aware, this session is being recorded, so you will be able to access this after the session as well. And I'll go through some housekeeping rules in a few moments. So without further ado, let's go ahead and make a start with the session. My name is Atif. You will have probably seen me on the over-the-counter video if you've already accessed it prior to the session. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and make a start. So this session today then, guys, is the first drop-in session of the year with Pharmacy Foundations. And as you will be aware, it's in relation to the over-the-counter masterclass video that has already been released. So I'm hoping quite a lot of you have already accessed that video. But even if you haven't, not to worry, there's quite a lot of other, I guess, points that I'll be talking on today. And then we will be making this session available on our website. Do make sure you make use of the chat functionality to send through any questions and queries that you might have. And in addition to that, there will be an element of this session whereby we make use of Slido. So just make sure you've got your smartphones or other devices at hand so that you can access Slido as well. So before I start then, can everybody hear me okay? I'm hoping. And this will also give me the chance to see if the chat functionality is working. So just let me know in the chat, can you hear me okay? How's everyone doing? Hope you are keeping well. Fantastic. I've got my first comment in the chat, so I'm going to take that as everybody can hear me okay, which is great. So let's go ahead and make a start then. For those of you who haven't attended a Pharmacy Foundation session before or haven't yet signed up to our online course, like I say, this particular drop-in is the first drop-in session linked in with our over-the-counter masterclass. It's an online course that we do deliver from now up until May, just before the exam. And there's a number of ways that you can, I guess, get involved with the platform. One of the key ways is by signing up to our monthly, sometimes bi-monthly online recorded videos. You can sign up to these as individual videos for which you will also receive hard copy content, things like revision posters, etc. And in addition to that, we also have the yearly discount as well. So all of that information is available on our website. And as you can see, there'll be lots and lots of different topics that we will be covering as part of our online program. So do make sure you sign up. And as an independent training organization, Pharmacy Foundations, we do offer a range of support for current and aspiring pharmacists. So do make sure, like I say, you check out our website as well as our social media platforms that we will be making available on the slides in a few moments. But yeah, as you can see there, undergraduate, foundation training, postgrad, we are involved with a number of different organizations, as you can see there. So today's session, I'll be leading on today's session. My name is Atif Sadiq, and I work as a portfolio pharmacist, so across general practice. As an advanced clinical practitioner, I do that usually 1 day a week. But aside to this, I work at the University of Bradford as an assistant professor in primary care pharmacy practice. And you might have also come across me through my role with Health Education England as a training program director for foundation training. But as far as Pharmacy Foundation is concerned, then I work here as the head of education, and it was actually myself who, I guess, delivered the over-the-counter video. So if you have seen that video, hopefully my voice will be quite familiar to you all already. And like I say, Pharmacy Foundations, there's lots of free content that we make available on our social media platforms. So do make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. There's also a Telegram support group that we used to have, but now has been switched over to WhatsApp. So again, do make sure you join us on that as well. And we have the QR code available on your screens now. So do make sure you give that a scan and join us in order to access support and also be linked in with other trainee pharmacists throughout the country. So without further ado then, let's go ahead and dive in to our over-the-counter masterclass drop-in session. Like I say, this session's linked into the video that we have made available on our website. I know some of you have already watched this and have got lots of different types of comments and questions and suggestions as well, which is always good to take on board. Lots of positive feedback as well, which is always nice to see. So we're going to try and link in with this as well. So here we are then, and let's go and dive into how we are going to deliver this drop-in session. So to start off with, I just wanted to kind of highlight some points in relation to over-the-counter and the GPHC. So as you are aware, when it comes to a variety of different topics, over-the-counter as a topic in itself is an examinable area. And one of the things that we covered in the video was the fact that the GPHC provided some detailed feedback in relation to over-the-counter performance of trainee pharmacists and the registration assessment. So I'm going to just start off with this just to highlight the importance of over-the-counter to you all, and then I'm going to give you a bit of an idea of what today's session is going to look like. So June 2022, the GPHC released a paper 2 feedback. Just like with every other paper, there'll always be feedback on the GPHC website. And the following key areas were highlighted by the GPHC. And I thought I'd share these with you before we dive into the content for today's session, just to show you the importance of being aware and being confident with over-the-counter knowledge. So these are the following areas that the GPHC has highlighted where candidates performed less well than expected. And these are as follows. The first one the GPHC highlighted was that they do expect for you guys to be able to differentiate between red flag symptoms and symptoms that might be able to be, managed appropriately within a community pharmacy setting. So that was one of the key areas of feedback that the GPHC provided, said that students or trainee pharmacists really struggled with red flags and really struggled with referring patients on where needed. The other area that they did say that trainees did struggle with include things like identifying, again, when it is appropriate to provide general signposting advice. So if somebody comes into the pharmacy, you don't always prescribe or sell something to them. Prescribing is a thing of the future, hopefully, but sell something to them. You can always signpost and provide further advice. But again, this is another thing that the GPHC felt that trainee pharmacists really struggled with. And the other couple of areas that they felt that trainee pharmacists did not do as well with include things like paracetamol dosage regimes. So one of the things that you will see on that video that we have released is, paracetamol dosage regimes. Again and again, we've mentioned you need to be able to recall this for, pediatric patients. And that's one of the things that the GPHC have said, look, we need to make sure that our trainee pharmacists are quite confident with this. And I believe in relation to the exam, I think there was one further thing that they highlighted when it links in with over-the-counter. And this was the fact that, when it comes to things like breastfeeding, which is a very, very important public health priority, trainee pharmacists need to be able to recommend what can be taken during breastfeeding, what shouldn't be taken during breastfeeding, etc. So when I was looking at the feedback from the June 2022 paper 2, about 75% of that feedback, guys, was actually linked into over-the-counter. So it does seem like, unfortunately, is an area that a lot of the trainee pharmacists do struggle with. So hopefully, once you have seen the video and once we have gone through this feedback, you will feel a lot more confident, because like I say, is an area where approximately about 75% of that paper 2 feedback where candidates performed less well, the GPHC linked that in with over-the-counter, which is quite a bit actually. So that was just to kind of set the scene for you all. And obviously, like I said, if you've got any comments along the way, just throw them into the chat. We will be using Slido in a few moments. So what does then our over-the-counter masterclass session include? For those of you who've already accessed this, you'll be aware that There's a variety of different things that this session includes, but one of the key things that I've been quite keen to focus on throughout that session is to make sure that you guys have the core knowledge, you have the foundations of the knowledge in relation to over the counter. Because the thing is, any training organization can sit down and talk through a set of slides whereby they go through a certain condition, then go through another condition, then go through another condition. That's good because obviously, you'll be picking up some content. But what we try to prioritize is whether you can get that foundation set in a way whereby even if the question is asked in the exam in a slightly different way, you've got the core knowledge to tailor your knowledge, baseline knowledge to answer questions. So you'll see that in that video, the way we go about delivering the content is first and foremost, we link it into the registration assessment framework. Thereafter, there's a key focus on how you can go about building up your over-the-counter knowledge because you need to be able to use the resources effectively as this is also an examinable area. Then we talk about the kind of resources that you should have at your fingertips whenever you're dealing with an over-the-counter query, general approach to over-the-counter complaints, and then it's a massive part of the session whereby we go through the clinical topics and we give you a snapshot of the key knowledge that you require for the different clinical sections. And for those of you who've already accessed the video, which I know quite a few of you have, based on the analytics that have come through to us, you'll see that there is also a massive 41 revision posters included with that as well. So if you haven't yet accessed the video, just make sure you access it after this session and then revisit this video that we have recorded. So what's the layout for today's session then? The layout for today's drop-in session will be as follows. So first and foremost, I'm going to make available a Slido event. Slido, if you haven't used that before, is an online platform on which you can post Q&A, questions and answers basically. And what we will be doing is we've made that live. So I'll be sharing a hashtag with you all. You can go on to Slido and you can start adding your questions onto there about over the counter from now until the end of the session. And if, for example, you don't have any questions, I would still say go on to Slido, because what you can do is if somebody else has asked a question, you can give that question a like, so it moves up the priority order. Because understandably, we're on this session today from now until 2 p.m. So some questions, depending on how many you've got, may have to wait until after the session where we answer them on things like WhatsApp. But as part of that, if you haven't got any questions, just like somebody else's. And then whilst you're populating them questions, then we'll be going through some content with you all today. Because obviously you're taking your time out, you're either watching this as the video or you're attending this session live. So hopefully we'll be able to answer some of them questions for you all. So your emailed questions will be answered. And then hopefully we'll give the opportunity to revisit a popular section of the video as well. So like I say, we do collect analytics, and there was this one area where a lot of you spent some time focusing on when you were watching the video, because the videos were paused for quite a while. And I think usually that's because it's an area that's quite engaging, but it might also be an area where you've got questions. So for that reason, I'm going to revisit that briefly. I've also got some bonus over-the-counter questions for you all today. So hopefully you'll have the opportunity to engage in them. And then by that time, once we've gone through all of that, we'll be able to go back to Slido, so that knowledge or that question bank that you guys have, we'll be able to revisit. So hopefully on the next screen, I'll be able to bring up some Slido information for you. With that, I was just going to also check, does anybody have any questions about the layout for today's session? Feel free to throw your comments, queries, suggestions into the chat. And I'll pause for a few seconds. This is the Slido event number. I'm going to briefly stop sharing the screen so that the admin team can also actually make available the Slido QR code. So hopefully the admin team can get that up for us in the background. There you are. So that's the Slido QR code and the Slido hashtag. So if you can all go ahead and scan that for me. If you're watching this video as a repeat, then obviously this Slido Q&A will not be live, but you can use our WhatsApp group to ask any questions that you might have. So I'll let you all do that. Once you've asked a Slido, just let me know in the chat that that's working for you, and then you can put in your Q&A. So there's a little section on Q&A. I'll let you type away your questions as we go through the session. But so that I can move on to some of the content, I'll briefly pause until you guys let me know that you can access that on Slido. Fantastic. So there's quite a few questions coming in already. I believe you guys can access that. So I'm going to start going through some content, and that Slido is going to be active throughout the duration of today's session, and then we're going to revisit that. In the top right-hand side of the screen, what I will do in case you've not been able to go onto Slido, I'll keep the hashtag number available for you all so that you can always see that whilst we're going through some of the other areas like I mentioned. Is that okay? Fantastic. Okay then. So the first section then that I'm going to focus on whilst you're populating your question on Slido is questions that you have already emailed in. These questions, I would say, are very valuable, actually. I was looking at them and thinking you are all thinking along the right lines, especially at this time of the foundation training year. So without further ado, then let's go ahead and have a look at these. So like I say, the Slido event is still live. So if you want to add your questions on, just go ahead and use that hashtag. If somebody else has asked a question and you want that to be answered, just like it so it moves it up the priority list. So one of the first questions that we had from people that have seen the video and just generally as well was resources best for red flags. So the question was, what resource is best to use for over-the-counter red flags? Because like I mentioned, this is an area that a lot of trainees struggle with. And as I did mention in the online video, that there are a variety of different resources that you can generally use for over-the-counter medicine. So there's this very nice section that we have on there where we break down the different types of resources into clinical, clinical, law and ethics, practical, ethical, etc. There's quite a few different resources because over the counter, as you can imagine, there's a lot to it. So we've covered that in great detail. But in relation to this question in specific, as I did mention on the video, is that I would probably break down the resources for red flags into probably 2 to 3 key resources. And my go-to resources for red flags, number one would be NICE CKS. So NICE Clinical Knowledge Summaries. That would be one key resource. And the other one, quite surprisingly, is the NHS website. So let me just talk briefly on this in case you guys are wondering why the NHS website and why NICE CKS. So as I mentioned before, I do work as an advanced clinical practitioner in general practice, and the nature of general practice, as you can imagine, is pretty much anything and everything can walk through the door. And remembering everything can be quite tricky. So to be fair, even within my day-to-day, when I'm working in practice, I use NICE CKS. And NICE CKS, the reason why I recommend that is because it really lists things in detail. So let's just say, for example, you're dealing with somebody who has, I don't know, a chest infection, and you want to know what the red flag symptoms are, because it could be a chest infection, but as you guys are aware, differential diagnosis, it could be a tumor, it could be a disease like TB, it could be a variety of different things. So when do you know whether you need to refer on to another provider, and when do you know what kind of red flags do you need to consider? And the reason why NICE CKS is really useful is when you go onto this website for any topic, just type in the topic's name, and it will tell you exactly when you need to immediately refer somebody onto hospital and when you can manage them in primary care. So I would say my key resource to go to is NICE CKS. But the reason why, in addition to NICE CKS, I recommend the NHS website is because, with NICE CKS, part of the background to NICE CKS, the website, it expects you to have some form of clinical knowledge, and generally it is made for general practice. So it's made for like a GP practice setting kind of thing. So the reason why I would recommend the NHS website on top of that is because sometimes there's certain things that you can do in general practice that you can't do in a community pharmacy. Or sometimes, for example, if you're focusing on red flags, there are certain things that are red flags in general practice that might not be, sorry, the other way around. There are certain things that are red flags in community pharmacy that might not be red flags in general practice. And the example of that would be a cough that's lasted for 3 weeks. Yeah, generally speaking, if somebody came into your community pharmacy and they had a cough that lasted for about 3 weeks, that would be a referral for you. That would be a red flag for you because you can't manage that in community pharmacy. It's likely to be a chest infection or something similar. Whereas in general practice, that's not necessarily a red flag. So for that reason, the NHS website, because it's made for the lay person, because it's made for patients, that will give you community pharmacy red flags. Whereas the NICE-CKS website, although it will link into community pharmacy red flags, it will definitely give you, obviously, the other types of red flags that you need to be aware of for general practice. So my two key resources then are NICE-CKS and the NHS website. Now, I know you've got access to Slido and you'll be putting on a variety of questions, but for whoever asked that question then, I'm not too sure if you're on the call today, or anybody else, in fact, does that make sense about red flags? And do you have any further questions about the types of resources that you need to use for red flags, or for red flags in general? What kind of, if there are any further questions, feel free to either pop them into the chat, or you can even unmute yourselves as well. That's fine. If you're fine with being recorded, feel free to unmute yourselves. And if you're all happy with it, just put in a smiley face or a thumbs up or something similar. But remember, NICE-CKS, NHS website, best resources for red flags. Is that okay? Are we happy? Perfect, perfect, perfect. That is great. Thank you. So the next key question that came up through emails was actually a specific question about a specific over-the-counter situation. Before I actually go ahead and reveal this onto the screen, I just thought I'd do a little bit of engagement with you all and see what you guys think about this. So if somebody has oral thrush, generally speaking, what kind of treatment is available over the counter? Let's see. And for those of you who are accessing this as a live recording, give it a thought. Maybe press pause if you want to answer the question. What could we give somebody if they were suffering from oral thrush over the counter? What kind of medicines are available? Fantastic. Miconazole oral gel. Fantastic. Now, if I was to say to you that there's a situation whereby you would not give miconazole oral gel based on somebody's other medicines, there's this one situation that everybody needs to be aware of. There's obviously other situations as well, but there's this one key. If I was to say to you, you need to like bet £100 on a medicine that never, never, ever should you use with miconazole oral gel, what would that be? Again, press pause if you're accessing the video, think about it. And for those of you who are online, just go ahead and type away. Fantastic. Yes, warfarin. Warfarin. So the question that came in was linked into this, and I'm glad you guys have answered this. Because part of, I guess, the question was linked into that. So here somebody sent in an email. I guess they were already aware of this interaction, and I'll talk about this interaction in a few moments, but let's have a read of their question. So it was, if somebody is on warfarin, what options other than miconazole are there for oral thrush? So obviously they were aware of this interaction. So let me just let you know that if somebody's on warfarin, guys, and you give them miconazole oral gel, there is a direct interaction between the two whereby the INR can be elevated significantly. So do you know, normally when you're looking out for interactions, generally speaking, we look at like topical treatments like creams and gels and ointments and inhalers. We tend to like not focus on the interactions that much because we think it's not necessarily systemic, and it's not going to cause a severe problem. But in this situation, it's one of those where miconazole oral gel, because a lot of it's absorbed through the oral mucosa, and even if not that much of it is absorbed through the oral mucosa, that interaction with warfarin is so significant that you should not ever sell anybody on warfarin the miconazole oral gel. Yeah, so that was something that this person had already realized. And the question is, if somebody's on warfarin, what options other than miconazole are there for oral thrush? Now, you might know the answer to this, so if you do, feel free to, pop that into the chat, or if you're on the video recording, you can just scream out the answer, what is available. But let's see what other people have mentioned in the chat. So we have got, fantastic. Nystatin oral drops would be the correct answer. So in a situation, if somebody's got oral thrush and they're on warfarin, unfortunately, you can't actually treat the oral thrush over the counter because nystatin is a POM, is a prescription only medicine, but you can actually refer this patient on for a prescription. So that's what I would do in practice, but it's fantastic to see that you guys have highlighted this. And one of the things that you'll see in that over the counter masterclass video is we talk a lot about recognizing interactions. We talk a lot about the importance of ensuring that you cover certain key things when it comes to clinical content and over the counter. But it's great to see that you've got that baseline currently, and that is actually popular exam question as well, so I'm glad you've already picked that up. So hopefully that answered the question for the person who sent that through. Anybody else got any general questions about interactions and over the counter? Feel free to either throw them into the chat, or if it's an idea that's brewing and you want to think about it before you ask the question, feel free to put that onto Slido. Obviously, if you're accessing the video recording, then what you can do is, throw a question onto our WhatsApp support group. So that's that there. So hopefully that makes sense. And like I say, feel free to throw in some questions. The next question then was in relation to POM2P switches. So somebody sent in the question via email asking about POM2P switches. So what are the main POM2P switches that we need to be aware of when it comes to over-the-counter knowledge? Now, for those of you who have watched the video, you'll remember one of the key things that I said at the very start of the video, and that was anything that's available over the counter, you are, in essence, prescribing this. And if you're prescribing something, then in my opinion, and to be fair, in the opinion of the GPHC, you need to know everything about the medicine. So a short answer to that question, what are the main POM2P switches that we need to be aware of? I would say anything that you can get over the counter as a P medicine, you need to know about, minimum dose, maximum dose, breastfeeding, interactions, etc., etc. You need to know that inside out. But if I was to be a bit more specific about POM2P switches, there's a variety of different ones that come to the top of my head, and actually we've got revision posters on these as well. So if you're struggling to remember certain things, we've got acronyms, etc. But there's things like PPIs. So there's quite a few different PPIs like omeprazole, etc. available over the counter. You got your chloramphenicol eye preparations. You got things like your amorphine nail lacquer, sildenafil, tamsulosin, Orlistat, lots and lots of different ones that are available as POM2P switches, whereby they were previously a POM and now a P. And we have got some really good infographics on them. So do make sure you have a look at them. And generally, anything available over the counter, you need to be aware of. And somebody's asked a question in the chat. Is there, is hydrocortisone available as a GSL? The answer to that is yes, it is available as a GSL. And that's one of the starter activities, actually, where we get you to guess a few different things about hydrocortisone. So I don't want to ruin that activity too much. I'm hoping you're watching this session after you've done the video, but that particular hydrocortisone is a very good example of a very complicated over-the-counter medicine. And I guess the less I say about that, the more. But there's quite a few other bits that we have as part of that activity. But yes, that's a very good suggestion there in the chat. So yeah, so main pump to P switches, in my opinion, everything available P you need to know. There's a few things that we do on that video that help you recognize what's available as a P medicine, because guaranteed, for some of you who work with Boots or with any training organization, but the reason why I say Boots is because they give their trainees this over-the-counter directory at the start of the year, is that it's quite difficult to know what kind of medicines are available over the counter because there's no one resource to it. So when you look at that video, hopefully it'll explain to you how you can go about picking up some of this key point and some of the common pitfalls as well, because I know some students, they'll use a specific resource to kind of build up their over-the-counter knowledge. But if you don't look at it properly, you can be completely heading down the wrong way when it comes to product licensing. So do make sure you're careful. And like I say, we cover that in a bit more detail. The final emailed question in that I'm going to briefly talk about, and I think as the year goes by, this list is going to be massive because more and more people will want to start picking up their revision and things as such. But the final question that we're going to focus on briefly was this one here. So up until what date does the GPHC expect us to know about updates / new changes? And I think this is a very good question, which doesn't only apply to over the counter. I'm glad it's been asked at the very start of the year rather than later on, because obviously I know why somebody asked this in relation to OTC, because there's lots of updates with OTC. Sometimes a drug has been recalled, sometimes a new drug has been available over the counter, sometimes there's changes in product licensing. So this question is a very relevant one, and it's one that I really like, actually. And my answer to this then, based on some of the engagement that I've had, through my various roles, is that the GPHC can technically test you on anything up until the day of the exam. So let's just say, I'll give you an example. When I was doing my we called it pre-edge back then, when I was doing my foundation training, one of the key changes that actually took place was tramadol went from being a lower scheduled CD to a CD3. So as you can imagine, things changed quite drastically with that. And we had this question, we're thinking like, do I need to know about it? Because obviously we started our revision around, whenever, September time, etc. But this change came in March, and we were thinking, will this be tested in this exam, and do we need to know about it? So I guess if I was to look at it from a proper GPHC type answer, you can be tested on anything up until the day of the exam. But what I want you to think logistically, and I guess in a smart way, is the GPHC are not going to be writing the exam the night before. Yeah, they're not going to be writing the exam the night before. So usually, I would say if you're really wanting to bet on something, anything probably about a month up until the exam. So let's just say the exam at the end of June, anything up until the beginning of June updates, definitely know them inside out. Anything that comes beyond the beginning of June, it's unlikely, but obviously you've got that kind of, you definitely need to make sure that you're keeping up to date with things. And that's, part of typical practice, isn't it? We need, as pharmacists, to be aware of the most current guidelines. So we need to make sure we're keeping up to date with a lot of that. But hopefully that makes sense in relation to this. And somebody asked another question, would you recommend focusing on the top 100 drugs as well? And that question, I guess, goes outside the remit of OTC, because top 100 drugs for me are not only over-the-counter drugs, but I will briefly answer that actually, because I think it's a very good question. Top 100 drugs, I would say definitely look at them. And we'll talk more about this when we cover our clinical topic, because top 100 drugs are drugs that you're dispensing or prescribing day in, day out. And the GPHC expect you to know pretty much everything about them as well. But I think it kind of falls into the realms of there's certain top drugs that you need to know in more detail than others. So just rewind and let me say that again. There are certain top 100 drugs that you need to know more than others. And that is based on things like high weighted chapters. So as you will be aware, we did a session at the start of the year, the introduction session. So do make sure you go onto our YouTube page for that, where we go through the registration assessment framework. And there are certain chapters of the BNF, like cardiovascular disease, like infections, like the CNS, central nervous system. These are like the top high-weighted chapters of the BNF. So any drugs that you're dispensing or any drugs that you're prescribing day in, day out within them chapters, they need to be on the top of your list. And to be fair, that top 100 drugs, there's a book called Top 100 Drugs. I do think that is a very fair reflection to an extent. But then there's additional things that the GPHC want you to know inside out. And actually, when you do look at our introduction session, what I did mention on that is these are known as high risk drugs. So the GPHC have said to you guys, which is quite nice of them actually, they've said that there's a list of drugs that you're definitely going to get at least one question on. And there's things like antibiotics, there's things like antihypertensives that you're definitely going to get a question on. So some drugs are, you know, better than others in terms of exam prep when you are trying to prepare. And obviously, when we're covering this content as part of our clinical chapters, we will really focus on the areas that you need to know in detail. So obviously, when we go through things like the CNS chapter, we will say that valproate is a key area, and we'll provide you with infographics and things as such. So hopefully that answers your question. That top 100 drug book is a good book as well. So do make sure you have a look at that, but try to link it in with what you need to know for the exam, which is that registration assessment framework. And somebody has come back to that question about tramadol. Was it the updated answer that was correct? So in that situation, when I was highlighting that in my training year, there was an update about tramadol, yes, because that update was in like March time. So from March until June, that's a long time for people to know about this change. And to be fair, the GPHC, what they like to do is if there's something as drastic or something as big as that tramadol change, you know, I would say if I was a betting man, I would put my money on a question, you know, coming up on that. So hopefully, you know, throughout the year when you're engaging, do try to make use of that WhatsApp group if you're unsure. What we can do, myself and the team that you saw on the slide earlier, we've got, you know, a range of experience. We'll be able to tell you what's smart to look into, what's not so smart to look into, what you should be worried about, what you shouldn't be worried about. But yeah, in that particular situation, it was the updated answer. You know, they were wanting to look at the updated answer. So that was the questions that were emailed in. Hopefully that's provided you with some, you know, information in relation to these questions themselves. And we've gone on and had some side discussions as well. If there's any further questions about them questions, put them into the chat. And obviously you've got the Slido hashtag on the top right hand side. So do make sure you are populating this. So that was section number 2. So if you do remember back, I said the layout of the session is number 1, you're going to populate your Slido questions, which you guys are doing so in the background. Fantastic. Number 2 is the email questions. And then number 3 is an area that you guys engaged with a lot more. So you must have pressed pause a lot longer. We look at analytics, like I say. So I think it might be that you were making extra notes, which is always good. But equally, I'm going to briefly go through it again and see if you've got any questions. So that's the purpose of hopefully doing that. And as part of our drop-in sessions, we'll try to do this once a month where we'll pick a certain area that you guys, you know, enjoyed or engaged with or whatever, so that we can obviously give you opportunity to ask further questions. And this particular slide actually was to do with the treatment of genital thrush. So in that session, as you will remember, probably about halfway through the session, we talk about the genital urinary system and over-the-counter medicine. And within that particular section then, one of the things that I was highlighting was that genital thrush, obviously, as you are aware, is a common over-the-counter presentation. And one of the things that a lot of the times students find as a bit of a revelation is that as well as managing vulvovaginal thrush over the counter, penile thrush can also be monitored and managed, in fact, over the counter as well. So what I did say that there was a few different ways to look at this, but more importantly, there's a few different ways that you can remember some of this information. So hopefully for those of you who have watched the video, you'll be able to answer some of the questions that I've got coming up in relation to vulvovaginal and penile thrush. So let's see how well you did concentrate. In the chat, if you can, just let me know what kind of treatments are available over the counter for, I guess, both vulvovaginal and penile thrush. And if it's still a revelation to you, if you haven't watched the video, then spoiler alert. But go ahead, tell me what kind of things can we give over the counter for vulvovaginal and penile thrush. So clotrimazole cream is one suggestion in the chat. Fluconazole capsule 150 milligrams is another suggestion. Fantastic. What else might we be able to give? So we can give a cream, we can give a capsule. Anything else that comes or springs to mind that we might be able to give? Fantastic. Yes, the clotrimazole pessary is another one as well. Now, from some of them suggestions, because I think generally speaking, you have external creams, internal creams, pessaries, and then you've got obviously the fluconazole capsule. Can any of you remember which of them can be used for penile thrush as well? Because obviously, understandably, there's certain things that you can and can't use. If you were to answer this question, if it was an MCQ or whatever, which of the following can you use for both penile thrush and vulvovaginal thrush? Any ideas? Again, drop your suggestions into the chat. Yeah, fantastic. So the cream and the capsule. So what we did do for you guys here, and I think this is an area where you probably paused because you were making notes, because there was additional discussions and there was alternative scenarios that I was trying to propose to you, because one of the things that I like to do is play devil's advocate when I'm covering some of this content. So the kind of things that we highlighted was that, generally speaking, for vulvovaginal thrush, you can use clotrimazole, and clotrimazole is actually available in 3 different preparations. So you've got external creams, you've got internal creams, you've got pessaries, you've got also, in addition to that, you've got the different strengths as well. So that's some of the things that I did highlight when you were on the video. So when it comes to external creams, the key thing here is that there's a very easy way to remember this. So there's 1% and 2%. And obviously in the exam, you need to be very, very specific with how long you use a particular product for. So the easy way to remember is, if you're using the 1% external cream in vulvovaginal thrush, you use it for a week. If you're using if you're using the 2% cream, you're using it for a week. If you're using the 1% cream, you use it for 2 weeks because it's weaker. It's not as strong. So that's one of the key things that we did highlight with that. But remember, it's 1% and 2%. And obviously in the exam, they might say to you, you are offering somebody a 2% cream. How long should you use it for? You've also got an internal cream. And this is usually, because it's such a high concentration at 10%, you only use that as a one-off, and you repeat that if needed after a week. And then there are also pessaries. So you might not have been aware of this, but there's 200 milligrams of 500 milligram pessaries. So the higher strength pessary is a one-off, but the lower strength, you've actually got to use it for 3 days. So these were the kind of things. And I would say, if you were probably spending your own time to try and figure this all out, it would have taken you a while. So hopefully you now know that these different preparations are available when it comes to the cream. And then the fluconazole, one-off, you would give it as an oral capsule, and then you can repeat that after a week. And then there's a number of combination products of the above. So these are the kind of things that we highlighted with that. And then the other thing that I highlighted was, and a common exam question, is the minimum and maximum age of use of these products for vulvovaginal thrush. So again, if you want to press pause, if you want to type into the chat, can you let me know what the minimum and the maximum available, minimum and maximum age of use is for vulvovaginal thrush? So 16 and 60, fantastic. So 16 years and 60 years. And then there's another thing about how many times you can use it within a given time period before you have to go and see your GP or your GP team. So you can use it, minimum age is 16 years, maximum age is 60 years, how many times can we use it before we need to see somebody? Fantastic. So twice within 6 months. So this is what we've highlighted here for you all. Hopefully, as a revision poster, that is pretty much everything that you need to know about the vulvovaginal thrush. Yeah. So obviously there's further information on SBCs if you really want to go into detail. And with penile thrush, as we were mentioning before, you can use clotrimazole and you can use fluconazole. Now, clotrimazole, again, the best thing about learning when you learn vulvovaginal thrush is a lot of it's applicable to penile thrush as well. So it's the same thing, 1 and 2%. The higher strength, you use it for a shorter sorry, actually in penile thrush, you use it for a slightly longer time. So my apologies there. So the key thing is it's available as 1% and 2%. And in this situation, you use it, both of them for 2 weeks, if you were going to use one or the other. And then the fluconazole dosing is the exact same. But the other thing that I wanted to highlight was when it comes to the minimum and the maximum age, it's the exact same. So that's one thing is once you can, highlight similarities between topics. One of the things that we always, notice is if you can look at similarities and differences between topics, then it makes your revision a lot easier. And that similarity is that minimum age of use is 16 years, maximum age use is 60 years. But the key thing is with penile thrushes, the female sexual partner can, so you can only supply the treatment for a penile thrush if a female sexual partner has had the thrush. If there's not a female sexual partner or the patient has just come in generally, then you wouldn't be able to treat penile thrush. So I've just kind of briefly gone through that again. If you're watching the live video, then, sorry, if you're watching the video recorded, then if you still got any questions, put them into our WhatsApp support group. Obviously, if you're on this session with us right now, if there's any further questions, feel free to throw your, feel free to throw your questions into the chat. So the question, one of the questions that's come through into the chat is, with penile thrush, can you treat it only if partner has vaginal thrush? And we've just answered that question. So hopefully you know the answer to that. Okay, so I'm gonna now move on to some quick fire bonus over the counter questions, and we're gonna try and then go back to Slido briefly, mindful of time. But before I do move on, final question. So you refer if they do not have a partner or their partner is a male. Yeah, in a penile thrush, if the patient doesn't have a partner or the partner is a male, then you would refer on because it could be something else. At least with a female partner, if they've got vaginal thrush, then you can say that there's some sort of cross-contamination. That's what the theory is based on. So hopefully that answers your question as well. Okay then, so bonus over the counter questions then, because we want to make sure that you guys are getting the most of spending your Sunday with us, or if you're accessing the live video, whatever time you're spending with us. And let's see what you guys think then your suggestions are. So I think the polling, it might be the admin team that needs to make use of this, because from my side, it does not seem to come up. So can the admin team make the first poll available? And if not, then just let me know and we'll try and maybe test this on our social media platform instead. Are we there? Okay. So I'm not too, I'll get the admin team to share the poll. Okay, because I can't see actually what's going on there. So it says the poll is now available to access. That is fine. I'll get the admin team to share their screen then, because I'm not able to see any of this for the time being. Let's have a look. Fantastic. That's the Slido screen. So what I'll do is I'll just share my screen again. apologies about this in the background. And what we will do is, if the admin team can stop the poll once most people have answered, and then share that across to the screen itself. And then just let us know in the chat once that's done. So the first bonus question, and I'll briefly read that off as well in the background, is as follows. So this was to do with sodium chromoglycate. So what is the maximum amount of sodium chromoglycate that you can sell when you are selling it over the counter? And the options were 5 mils, 10 mils, 13.5 mils, or none of the above. So if you can't access the poll, just throw your answers into the chat. What is the maximum that you can have over the counter? And if the admin team can just put into the chat then what the most popular answer was, that would be great. So 13.5 mil, 10 mils, 5 mils, or none of the above. And if you can just let us know what the most popular answer is. Fantastic. So most of you have gone for 10 mils. Is that the correct answer? Drum roll sound. Yes, it is. So well done if you got that correct. So sodium chromoglycate, you can actually sell this as 5 mils as well as 10 mils over the counter. Can anybody tell me then, and you might want to pause the video if you're watching this online, what is the minimum age of use over the counter? Any ideas? So 5 mils you can actually sell over the counter, but the maximum you can give is 10 mils. But my question is, what is the minimum age of use over the counter? We can, in the chat, let us know. Take a wild guess if needed. And for those of you who are at home, take a guess as well. I'll put you all out of your misery then. Minimum age usually is 6 years. Obviously, if you're looking at it from a prescription-only medicine, then you can't use it as a prescription-only medicine below the age of 2. But when it comes to over-the-counter, minimum age of use is 6 years. We'll have a go at one more bonus question. So I'll get the admin team to activate that poll. And once that poll is active, just let me know so I can start reading off the question as well. Okay, fantastic. So for those of you who are accessing this as a video, then the poll is, what self-care advice should you not give someone with acute diffuse otitis externa? So option A is to use a hairdryer to dry the ear canal after washing. Option B is to use cotton buds to clean the ear canal. Option C is to abstain from water sports for 7 to 10 days. And the final option is to use earplugs and or a tight fitting cap when swimming. So what self-care advice should you not give to someone with acute otitis externa? Righto then. So once majority have answered, then if you can, just go ahead and let me know in the chat, if the admin team can let me know who selected what. Okay, so most popular answer was not to use cotton buds to clean the ear canal. So again, the question was, what self-care advice should you not give somebody with acute diffuse otitis externa? Well done, guys. That is the correct answer. So you should not use cotton buds to clean the ear canal. That is in all situations. So even if somebody's got a buildup of earwax, do not recommend to use the cotton bud. And I guess one that some people will struggle with to understand is using the hairdryer, because that sounds quite dangerous. Obviously, we're not saying whack on the hairdryer to super hot number, I don't know, 4 setting and burn the inside of your ear, but actually gently using the ear hairdryer to clean or dry the ear canal after washing is recommended for otitis externa. And that actually links in with the points that I was saying before. Do make sure you're looking at NICE CKS guidelines when it comes to the evidence treatment that you're giving. You need to back it up with evidence. And NICE is actually recommending to you to use the hairdryer. So you need to make sure that you're looking at credible resources, and NICE actually recommend that. Is there a list of over-the-counter conditions that we are meant to be aware of, or how do we know if we have covered everything? So on that video then, you'll see, and within our infographics, we've got a list of all the different over-the-counter conditions you need to know in detail. So that particular list is available as an infographic. You can go ahead and have a look at that within the packs that you will receive as part of that session. Okay then, so let's go to the Slido then, over to the admin team. Briefly, let's see how many questions I can quickly cover before we do round off, and let's see where we are with that. So like I say, you can like questions, and the question that is on at the top of the screen is as follows. So is there a resource that collates all of the over-the-counter licensing ages? Answer to that is nope, unfortunately. However, you'll see in some of our infographics, like for example, the antihistamines infographic, we've actually listed all the minimum ages that you need to be aware of for antihistamines and for some of the other products as well. We're obviously working towards creating a massive, gigantic resource. If you guys beat us to it, you probably make a lot of money, but there is no one single resource. Because as you can imagine, there's lots and lots and lots of different over-the-counter medicines, but we do it quite well for some of our conditions. So you'll have a look at that, particularly for things like antihistamines. Otherwise, it's a matter of using the EMC or the BNF, like I mentioned in that session. And there are a few other ways that you can use the BNF to find that information. So hopefully that answers that. Do you have a good resource for different skin condition presentations? So with that, we have actually got some very good infographics on things like childhood skin infections, as well as how you should go about diagnosing skin conditions. One of the things that I highlight actually within the session video is some specific websites for skin conditions. And there is one called DermNet or dermnets.nz or NZ. I said Z. I don't know why I said Z. That's probably because that's how some people will say it. Dermnet.nz, New Zealand. It's a New Zealand website, and it's very, very good as an encyclopedia for different skin conditions. Obviously, the NHS website is quite good as well, but Dermnets is very good. There's also another platform that's available through the RPS website, which talks about the different skin tones as well. But generally, DermNets is probably the best one. It's massive. It's got lots and lots and lots of different skin conditions on there. And the last one is, how do we access those 41 posters that you mentioned at the start of the Zoom session? The way you access the 41 posters is by signing up to the over-the-counter session. Don't worry, you know, that session you can access throughout the year. So if you weren't there for the release date of that session or any of our other sessions, you can always order later on. It's not going to affect your learning in any way. All you do is you order, you get instant access to the video, and then the resources are usually posted out to you, and then you use them in combination. So hopefully that answers, and that's the top 3 popular questions, it seems like. I'm going to briefly share my screen then before we round off. So hopefully you guys have found that useful. Slido questions have been answered. And we're going to just round off then, and hopefully within that 1 hour mark. So that was the over-the-counter masterclass. If you've seen the video and you've attended this drop-in session and you've got any further questions, onto our WhatsApp group or onto our Instagram if you want to. The next session then is going to be genitourinary immunity and malignancy. The video for this will be released on the 20th of November, so just a few weeks from now. So do make sure that you sign up to this well in advance so that you can get access to the hard copy notes in time. There is an actual discount offer available until the end of this month. Year on year, we get students saying, after the discount offer's finished, oh, can I get the discount now? Unfortunately, it's not how it works because it's not fair on people who might have booked early. If you are though struggling to pay this year, what we have done actually, just to make things a little bit easier for you, is there is a direct debit option available. And obviously, if you just want to come to certain webinars, you can pick and choose. So do make sure you sign up to that. We will be doing a drop-in session. You might not be able to access the drop-in session for free if there's more, if there's less tickets available. So the only way to guarantee access to these drop-in sessions, guys, is to sign up to the session. And do make sure you follow us on social media. So we are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Instagram, we release lots of useful content on there, usually a few times a week. So make sure you access that. And last but not least, do make sure you give that QR code a scan and you join our WhatsApp group to be kept up to date about upcoming developments. That was the over-the-counter drop-in session, guys. Hope you did enjoy that for some fun, short, quick-fire learning. I hope to see you all on a future session. Thank you ever so much, and we shall see you soon.